Every so often, some bizarro occurrence reaches out across the vast, unimaginable expanses of an unknowable alternate universe, grabs a hold and slaps the ever-loving shit out of me until I'm at last awake enough to admit that it exists, even if I don't know exactly what it is. Right now, for instance, I'm typing out these words from the fuzzy haze of muscle relaxers, ibuprofen, and the prospect of an after-dinner Valium due to the ongoing shooting electric bolts of searing pain being sporadically shot through my back muscles, setting ablaze every nerve ending embedded in my spine. I indeed have the devil's backbone running down the center of my being right now, and I indeed have no fucking idea what it means that the film so named has befallen me. Or rather, I have no idea why this spinal malady has befallen me on the very day that I was scheduled to watch and write about the devil's backbone. Bear with me, my mind is blurring on metaxalone. What I can say is that the agony that has spasmed me to my knees on more than one occasion today and makes rising from the ground a full 2-minute ordeal has me in the same sort of existential fly-in amber suspension as the characters in Guillermo del Toro's 2001 film. I can't move backward or forward. No left or right. Hell, I can't move off the floor. I am poised on a pinpoint of purgatory, a moment of suspended pain, for what could conceivably be forever. At least from the self-medicated viewpoint it could be forever. Also like the characters in Del Toro's film, because of this non-coincidence of my backbone being tortured while I contemplate Del Toro's, I currently maintain, and with full conviction, that there are things at work on us that can only be termed supernatural. I remind you again that I'm heavily medicated. In Del Toro's film, the devil's backbone is a birth defect that causes a baby to be born with its spinal cord exposed. One of the headmasters at the orphanage where 12-year-old Carlos suddenly finds himself informs us that legend has it that these are babies that shouldn't have been born. In the fervently Catholic setting of early 20th century Spain, this means that these tiny souls are hung eternally in purgatory. The headmaster proceeds then to show Carlos examples of these dead infants, their spines running down the outsides of their backs like mortal wounds as they float forever suspended in some mystic preservative akin to formaldehyde, but here the juice is concocted of ingredients that speak of magic and witches. Rum and eye of nude, I think. He goes on to say that he sells the fluid to the local townfolk for its quote-unquote healing powers. This just before taking a shot of the elixir himself, evidently to aid him in his impotence so he can get it on with the other headmaster. Anyway, these pickled babies serve as a metaphor for the film's major theme. The local townfolk are drinking the baby fluid, the headmaster is drinking it, and so it's implied that they're very much in a state of mystic suspension. But more importantly, it prompts us to contemplate the ways the theme extends into just about every other aspect of the dual narratives at work in this story. Set during the Spanish Civil War, immediately after the above-mentioned Carlos is dumped off at the orphanage in the middle of nowhere, Spain, a ghost child declares itself. While Carlos and the rest of the ragtag boys poke around for some background on the dead kid, the outside world with its raging winds of war presses in, sweeping up with it the adults residing in the orphanage, and then, ultimately, the kids and the resident ghost as well. Barring a single scene that references Goya's famous painting The 3rd of May, 1808, the entirety of the drama plays out in the rooms, catacombs, and courtyard of the orphanage. A courtyard, incidentally, that's moored by a bomb that has dropped but never exploded. So here what we have is a ghost suspended between two worlds, a country suspended between its present and future, a bomb suspended between impact and explosion, and a whole host of characters suspended in the interconnecting dramas of their lives. The bomb, perhaps, is suspended by God himself. The humans are suspended by love, guilt, fear, or some combination thereof. And there's certainly enough turgid melodrama evident here to support Del Toro's claim that the film was intended to be a Gothic romance in an unlikely setting. And this works once you come to terms with the fact that the villain isn't a ghost at all, and this might not even be a horror film. Instead, the bad guy is one of the living and breathing men, replete with human foible. No, this isn't your typical ghost story. It's better. And the ghost is better too. It swims through a sort of liquid air, a broken porcelain beauty, the cracked innocence of Spain herself, suspended in its demands for justice. Del Toro claims that The Devil's Backbone is the film of his that's most dear to him, the one in which he most fully achieved what he'd envisioned at conception. Unfortunately, the film was released in the weeks following 9/11, a time when films with war backdrops were dangerous from a marketing standpoint, and so it sort of faded away, as it became suspended in its own sort of commercial limbo. Fitting, in a way, all things considered, but thankfully not too much harm done, for its companion piece, Pan's Labyrinth, stunned audiences everywhere a few years later, and from what I could tell, Backbone has picked up a pretty avid following in retrospect, freeing it from the shackles of cinematic purgatory. Which, as I hang by the razor wire by the tiny nerves in my lumbar, is more than I can say for myself. Jesus, where's my Valium?
Yeah, maybe I should have been on that stuff when I watched this movie. Did we watch the same movie, Joe?
You hated it, huh? You're not a Del Toro
I am
fan.
not at all, and I did not like Pan's Labyrinth at all.
You don't like
Oh,
Guillermo
really?
del Toro in general, right?
I don't, Bill. I
Let me
tried to
rephrase that.
help.
You don't like Guillermo del Toro's films in general, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's probably more accurate. Man, it just doesn't appeal to me. What he's up to. I can't, Joe, you're watching this movie and you're digging deep into it, and you're finding the themes, and you're finding the hurt, you're finding the pain, you're finding the love, you're finding the joy, and I'm just not seeing any of it, man. It's just sad. It's sad that I can't do it.
Yeah. Is it because is it something like similar why you can't stand like The Hobbit and all that kind of stuff, like the fantasy stuff?
I can't get into any of that stuff.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It doesn't appeal to me whatsoever.
Yeah, I hear you, man. Del Toro is not my favorite of these three, but I certainly find his stuff beautiful. I mean, like, you don't find it visually.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to find it visually.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's extremely impressive. Extremely. And there are times I'm watching The Devil's Backbone and I'm just like in awe of some of the shots. Are just so, I mean, the desert, it's just so beautiful.
The contrast.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The contrast between the interiors and the exteriors
and
is
here's the thing too, is that in both The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, the most sinister character, their performances are off the charts.
Yeah.
Like this Jacinto dude was just pure evil.
Yeah.
Pure. I mean, just, and not overdone. Like he was like calm. There was like he was calm and scary. And who's the dude in Pan's Labyrinth? The stepfather? The general,
yes,
if I remember.
The general, yeah, the stepfather.
Who played the stepfather in that film? Does anybody remember?
Oh, jeez.
Because that's a performance it's just absolutely amazing.
It is insane.
And yet all this stuff, Joe and Billy, I can't get into this film.
There's a lot of great things about the film, but you hate the film.
I can't say I hate it. But it just doesn't appeal to me. Like this, it just.
Like when you were a kid, you didn't get into the fantasy stuff at all, huh?
Never.
Like the comic
Crystal,
books.
like all that stuff, I never got into. No.
What about comic books and that kind of stuff? I mean, you like comic movies.
Yeah, I do. Well, superheroes I enjoy. The typical DC, or Marvel.
Right.
Not even so much Marvel, more DC.
Yeah.
Superheroes. Yeah, I do enjoy them, but.
Yeah.
But that it's just like the same thing like with Peter Jackson. It's like I like Peter Jackson, but like when he gets into that into the Hobbit stuff and all that other stuff, it doesn't work for me.
Because like you almost sense when the ghost shows up in this movie that it's not like a terrifying ghost. It's more of like a realm of the fantasy type of ghost.
It
right?
reminded me of Pan's Labyrinth for some reason.
Yeah,
the way the movie felt, it totally felt like Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, well, it's very much a companion piece to Pan's Labyrinth. It's almost the exact same setup inverted. Like
I felt like it was almost a remake in a weird. When I saw Pan's Labyrinth, I'd already seen The Devil's Backbone, and I was like, "Hey, I've seen this before."
Wow. Yeah, it's the same. Not an orphan in Pan's Labyrinth, but they go to a place that's sort of in the middle of nowhere, and there's like outside political strife that pushes in, and the child deals with something on a fantasy level, that is sort of tied into what's happening around her in the outside world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I tried Del Toro maybe about 7 years ago. Someone lent me Pan's Labyrinth and Hellboy, and they were just like, man, you're gonna love this. This is, this dude is awesome. I can't believe you never saw this. And I watched both films, and I was like, nah.
You know, man, to be fair, I'm not crazy about the Hellboy films, and I saw that commercial for Pacific Rim,
Yeah,
and
right.
I wanted to time my
dude. You were bashing
eyes.
that during one show without even seeing it. You were like,
I was bashing the advertisement, just the they were big monsters,
right.
so we made bigger monsters. Like it's just
ridiculous.
It's almost a parody of itself, I think, probably.
But there's no doubt that Peter Jackson and Del Toro, they both, they're almost the same flavor.
Del Toro was going to direct the Hobbit films,
right? And then it was just in production way too long, or there was money problems, or something happened where Del Toro had left the project and Jackson took over. I know Del Toro is credited, I think, as a writer on the first Hobbit movie. But he was going to direct Hobbit, which is probably perfect for him.
Yeah, he would have. It would have been actually a little bit more interesting because it would have looked probably less like the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
But one thing I will tell you, Joe, going into the Devil's Backbone, whenever we go back to any horror, like I'm immediately rolling my eyes.
And are you still having trouble? Are you still having trouble watching horror films?
It's just, I'm like, dude, there was just so much of it, Joe.
It was just enough horror. But it wasn't enough horror to last you for like 2 decades.
But it wasn't even just the horror films. It was just the whole horror community that we were wrapped up in, and all that nonsense.
Yeah, but I mean, the community is great, man.
It is. I mean, it is great, and I do appreciate it. But what I want to say is that this isn't a horror movie.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I don't think it is really either, and nor do I think Pan's Labyrinth is. And
no.
for some reason, it gets picked up on the horror circuit a lot, doesn't it? If I'm not mistaken, anyway. Is that correct?
Well, it's classified on IMDb as a horror film.
It is.
Yeah. You guys did you happen to listen to any of the interviews with Del Toro about the stuff, or his feelings on the origins of horror and all that?
I didn't hear that, but I did listen to some of his commentary on that.
I read some stuff. I know that he said about this film that this is his favorite film, I think, that he did. It was the one film that he's done that he felt that was, like, since its conception and through its finality, that it was the closest thing to him that he's ever accomplished.
I heard that somewhere too. I think it was 10 minutes ago in Joe's review.
Yeah, I did mention that in the review. All
right.
But I think that I think that maybe there might be something going on where like if there's a litter of puppies and one's sort of like maimed or something, then the mother puppy like kind of favors that one. You know what I mean? Like, because I think that he wanted this one to be more successful than it was commercially speaking, and I think that it just was released at poor timing, and it probably would have been a little bit better, had a little bit better reception out there if the timing was a bit better,
Joe, I got a question for you. Your review made me feel like I was on drugs of some kind, painkillers. I came out of it and I was like, that was really interesting, but I still have no idea what you thought about the movie. Like, did you actually enjoy the movie? You would recommend it? You thought it was good? I mean, what's your critical analysis of the movie and Del Toro in general?
Give a critical. No, I enjoyed the movie. I did enjoy the movie. I don't think it's a fantastic film, but it's certainly worth looking at.
You're a pretty huge fan of Pan's Labyrinth, though, right?
I really am taken by the visuals of what he does. You know what I mean? Like I really do dig what he's up to, as like visually speaking. I was a fan of Pan's Labyrinth. Pan's Labyrinth, but I don't think like incredibly so. And I think that I become less of a Del Toro fan as you start moving through the years, like more and more recent. Like I was saying, the Hellboy stuff I never even bothered with, and like
he did a Blade movie too.
Yeah,
he would have to do something wickedly amazing to restore your faith after Pacific Rim.
Well, I haven't seen Pacific Rim, to be fair, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
don't think
Joe
I
hated
would.
Pacific Rim.
Yeah. No, man, I thought this was a good film. Del Toro, I think this might be a case where Del Toro sort of, his reputation precedes me, so I'm looking for greatness in it a
Mm.
lot. I've seen Pan's Labyrinth twice, and this was the second time I've seen this. I did enjoy this one the second time better, and I enjoyed Pan's Labyrinth better the second time as well.
Mm.
So, yeah, I like these two films. I do. I do. I like them a lot. Are you not a fan of them?
I
Let's. What about you, Billy? How do you feel?
Well, Del Toro is one of those guys who I love listening to him talk. I mean, I feel like I could hang out at his place and, bullshit about Gothic novels and comic books and all that stuff till the cows come home. So, it's like there's something at the heart of what he does that I have a lot of affection for. And, uh, he's so sincere, man. Like he's not a phony, and that's
Yeah.
really something. And he says one of my favorite quotes that I've heard a filmmaker say is, "Monsters are the patron saints of imperfection." And in a weird way, I know this sounds crazy, but I feel like what he's doing with monster films and horror and all that stuff is culturally important because it's the same thing. He's making you sympathetic to the monster, right? It's more in the vein of Frankenstein and
Yeah.
empathy. He's asking for empathy, and there's no, the bad guys. It's so important. I feel like in a horror movie that the bad guys, it's about decisions that people make that are very deliberate. There's not some mystical force, some vague whatever. And the bad things that happen are usually because of insecurity, greed. You're trying to control your universe. You have a tight grip on your universe, and he's always making sure to weave that into his stories. So in a weird way, I feel like what he's doing is a real service for society. Like
Well,
keeping
that
a more richer form of horror and the whole comic book horror fantasy thing, pushing it into deeper water a little bit.
Yeah, this is, that's exactly the reason why I think that I like the films better on the second viewing is because he defies expectation by making you feel for the monster. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you're expecting the monster to be this ghost and everything, and then
Right.
it's unsettling almost or disquieting when he's not, and then you have to sort of reframe, rework your frame around it, and then the second viewing, you see that it's actually a really beautiful little uh, parable,
Yeah, because he
and
kind of messes with you in this film in that sense because you don't, the Jacinto dude, you don't really figure out that he's friggin' nuts until the middle of the movie.
yeah, he turns the tables on
Yeah,
you
he
because you're
does.
thinking that which is really
He
something
flips
that,
that shit.
yeah. Yeah, it's nice, man. I mean, it's a great. That's why I think I like these films better the second time.
But at the same time, I do feel like his visual style is so perfect and it's completely his in a weird way. It's very personal, and it's just magnificent. But at the same time, I usually come out at one of his movies wishing there was a better writing and better structure, and just a little more substance. Like he's so good at what he does. I feel like it overwhelms any other sort of redeeming factor in the movies sometimes. Like I just feel like I come out and it's the most beautiful eye candy ever. I don't know. I kind of always walk away feeling like I wanted something more from his movies.
Mm-hmm. It's weird because I think I sort of feel like that now and again, but then again on the second viewing and a closer viewing, I
Right.
see how these themes are like actually pretty subtle.
Mm.
Like all that stuff about the suspended, these entities being in a state of suspension and purgatory and waiting. Like that's actually really good subtle writing.
You
Like
gotta,
it's
you gotta. If anyone hasn't, listen to the audio commentary for Devil's Backbone because it's just Del Toro talking nonstop, and he's one of the most articulate, well-informed people I've ever heard speak on
Billy,
any number of subjects.
You watched, I mean, you saw this before, obviously. So this time around, you watched it with the commentary?
Yeah. And I mean, he's referencing, the symbolist painters and Bauquelin and Gothic romantic poetry, and he elaborates his theory of the development of 20th century horror from graveyard poetry of the 1800s back to the idle classes of Europe in the 1700s. I mean, he's just the most well-informed person ever, and it's not bullshit at all. Like, it all makes sense what he's talking about, and he just clearly has a love for the material. And then you see how he's weaving that stuff into he's making a Gothic romance crossed with a ghost story, crossed with a Western, and a war film. And he points out in this film that the two war scenes, he wanted to deal with the Spanish Civil War in the film, but he only really wanted to do it in two scenes or two ways. One was the bomb that sits in the courtyard, right? And the bomb is cartoonishly oversized, right? Because they didn't have bombs that big, obviously.
Yeah, it was like bigger than a plane.
Yeah, it was like 8 feet tall, right?
Yeah.
And he said they're obviously very small, but this is a symbol, and this is war as seen from the perspective of a child. They're looking up at this mechanical monstrosity. And the other is the scene that you referenced with Goya's great painting. And he said, I just wanted to show the horror of all of this happening out there without showing a war movie, because war is reprehensible and no one wins and everyone loses. I didn't want to show exciting battle scenes.
Right.
I wanted to show the effects of it and how it actually affects.
It's just referenced.
And it's so funny. There's this really profound, convicted anti-war sentiment right in the middle of this horror movie,
Right.
Yeah, and that's it's sort of what I was honing in on with that thematic thing too. Like he's drawing this parallel between a ghost suspended in time was unjust, and was unjustly murdered and not avenged, and that's sort of what happens in a civil war. In a way, people are put into a state of suspension.
And it's interesting. Sorry, Tom. Just cross-referencing here. The one of the last films that Alfonso Cuarón worked on was Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine, like a short little piece on introducing the book. And they're, all these guys, they come from they come from Mexico, where politics are a little more raw and in your face, and you don't have quite as much of a veneer of the society is more aware of what's going on, I feel like, than in a country like America, where we sort of pretend things aren't what they actually are, And so they're Cuarón was dealing with the shock doctrine and how in crises the powers that be, use that to manipulate. And Del Toro was dealing with exactly the same thing in this movie, like the way people get trapped in that situation, like suspended animation, like you're saying, Joe.
It was weird because he originally had written the screenplay, from what he says, in Mexico, and the Devil's Backbone is actually a chain of a mountain range.
Yeah.
There, and the metaphor was
the Mexicans.
Yeah, well, it was a completely different. The metaphor was similar. It was something like God, instead of it being, these kids born with their spines exposed, it was something about God and the devil come and battle every 100 years over one soul or something like that. Or they had a battle, and God left and the devil stayed, and that's his backbone is the mountain range or something, So it was like, yeah, it was the same sort of stuff where the humans are sort of caught in the middle of this sort of existential thing. But does anybody know why he ended up shooting it in Spain? It's just very difficult to make a film in Mexico, or what's anybody know any background on that? Because I looked, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
No? I couldn't tell you either. I know that it was produced by Pedro Almodovar, who probably saw something that Del Toro, if I had to guess, I would say that he helped get that funded, and part of the deal with that was that it be shot in Spain, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know any hard information on it now.
Yeah, it's just weird because we're filming about Mexico. You know, we're doing a show about Mexicans, and
And pretty soon we're heading to Japan.
Yeah, no one's no one's. Yeah, I know. There's not really much Mexican production going on, but
No.
but yeah, that's another country I mean, their political strife has been ongoing for hundreds of years since Spain left. Which is just pretty incredible. Which I actually think. I know I'm jumping tracks here, but you two Mama Tambien was actually
I know you would
has a
have
lot
loved to have
do.
reviewed that one, huh?
Yeah, well, because again on the
Who
second
wouldn't?
viewing of that, I see it as an allegory for class struggle and identity and all that kind of stuff, and that's happening in Mexico. So it would have been ripe to sort of talk about that a little bit, I guess. But it's all right. I'm trying. Basically, one of the things that I've been trying to figure out is how these three filmmakers, who all are from the same country, what is tying them together. I mean, they're obviously three completely different film
No doubt
styles
about
and
it.
approaches.
And
You know what I
they
mean?
help each other out. Like they help each other with ideas. They influence each other, and yet all three are completely different.
Yeah, I know. Like the only thing that I could come up with is this really devout attention to the theme, and
Yeah,
that's really what's great about like any great artist is what they're doing is trying to hammer away at some theme, and that's just an awkward, clumsy expression for you know the something that's that's really important to you or deep or passionate or inexpressible, something that's like really inexpressible that you need to go and make a work of art surrounding it to try to understand whatever it is better, you know what I mean? And I think that is what I find evident in all three of these guys, and it's why I focused on theme mostly in my review here of Del Toro's film. And I appreciate that the most when you get a sense that somebody's really in earnest looking for an answer or a better understanding of what's at the heart of the theme, and not just having like a lot of lesser filmmakers will just construct some sort of genre narrative
like
and
Tarantino.
then well, whatever, and then and then inject a theme as an afterthought.
Take that, Tarantino.
Yeah, fuck.
Like, and then in the so they have a film, and then they were like, oh well, part of a film is a theme, so let's inject one, and it usually becomes something really, really friggin' hokey. But all three of these guys, and even in Babel, what we'll talk about in a few minutes, Tom,
Right.
they're really investigating something, and that's something that I really appreciate. I know I kind of went off subject.
No, the Cuarón in particular is fascinating to me because his movies almost don't have a plot, and I guess let me rephrase that. His first couple of films were really interesting. A Little Princess. You guys probably haven't seen any of his like early Hollywood stuff.
Great Expectations.
Great Expectations. I was the one of his in that period that I hadn't seen, and I just watched it, and it's interesting. Like he's more interested in the lasting impression of a film on you than in the actual structure of the film itself,
Yeah.
And I mean, every one of his movies that I see, I come away with, and they sort of glow in the back of my head for a really long time, even though I, recognize their flaws and all of that. And it's the same with Children of Men, which is just, it burns in your head so long after you've seen it, yeah. I like your approach, Joe. They're very obsessive about the after effect of their
and that's why like on the second viewing here, when I watched the film through that, trying to ascertain what he was getting after, it really became a rewarding experience. You know what I mean? And the fact that I was in friggin' insufferable pain with my fucking back and I'm friggin' high on painkillers.
Yeah, Joe. Yeah, boy. But it's funny because that bomb, oh god, I must have just been out of it or something. I just didn't think of the bomb being a ghost as well, like that. Right? I mean, is that what we were talking about earlier? That bomb sitting there acts like a ghost, because I I mean, that's what it seems to me, right?
Well, or something that's going to make them all ghosts, or could have made them ghosts. You
Right,
know what I
right.
mean? So like that just goes back to that thing where here's a bomb that could have exploded, but it didn't. So they're almost like on borrowed time,
Right.
or
Or
just
they
caught.
are all, or they are ghosts, living ghosts, really.
Yeah, in a
In a
sense, they
sense,
are.
right? Yeah.
They're all in a state of suspension.
Right. Yeah. War. Jesus. Billy's comment. One more thing on Del Toro from me, anyway, about his quote about monsters being the what is it about patron saints of imperfection.
That's it.
It's funny because he's working on he's developing a TV series on the Incredible Hulk, and he's also working on a Frankenstein movie.
He's been working on that
Oh,
Frankenstein movie forever.
Right, right. And I
which one
what the
is? Yeah, is it Crimson Peak? That one? No,
Crimson Peak. What's that?
I don't know. It showed up on his IMDb page, so I was wondering what that might have been. Or I guess that's not
he
it.
raves about some lost Frank Darabont Frankenstein script that needs to be made. Like he's just like it was something that was written like 20 years ago. He really wants to make it. He
That's
thinks
great.
it's brilliant. I don't know anything about it, but I know that Billy, right? He's been probably toying with that idea for a long time.
He ended up kind of a golden boy for a while, and like Hollywood basically threw every project that was like had been collecting dust on the shelf. Like they were like, let's give it to Guillermo, and he ended up with like a dozen projects in rotation, and so yeah, there's been all these rumors and stuff about what he was going to make next for forever. So
They do that a lot with like a hot commodity.
I'm sure the guy made a bajillion dollars just like
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's how Kevin Smith made all his money.
I'll take $500,000 to consult on this script.
Right after Kevin Smith did Clerks, like Hollywood, like they just like grabbed him and they gave him like 20 scripts to rewrite. He made like $10 million just rewriting scripts that never got made.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, it's working wonders for us all.
For the record, Pacific Rim is better than Man of Steel. If that means anything.
Well, you saw Pacific Rim with the youngster, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I did. My nephew.
That's an automatic extra star when you go see a film like that with a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Even if it started at 0, it would still get 1 star.
Oh man, I didn't.
Which is what Superman got, was 0, right?
Superman is a big fat 0. If I could, I actually go into negative with Superman. I think that the Man of Steel is a dangerous film and it should be.
Tom, I was looking at there's a hole where I need to schedule my next thing, and I see that Superman's coming out on DVD like right before I'm supposed to schedule, like right around when we're supposed to film my next show. Uh-huh. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm like toying with maybe putting it on the schedule.
Yeah. Well,
Tom, did you see that? Have we had this conversation?
We haven't had a discussion on Man of Steel. I think Billy didn't like your last tweet was like when the Man of Steel came out and it was knocking the Man of Steel. You haven't tweeted anything since.
No, you're following me though. I'm proud of you, Tom. I got too depressed. It was too depressing. But yeah, the Man of Steel. It's crazy because
I felt that night, Billy, when I got home, like I felt like I wanted to kill myself.
You hated the movie that much.
Oh my God, I was so disappointed. Bill, Joe, was I not looking forward to Man of Steel?
Well, that's what it was. I don't even think that he was so disappointed about I don't even think it was that the film was so bad. It was just that his hopes were so high. Yeah, like he built your hopes up so high.
Are you a big Superman nerd? You're like a Seinfeld.
I love
Superman.
I love the Donner stuff, like the Superman the movie, and I love Superman 2. I love Superman 2, like beyond belief. Like when it's on HBO, like I always pop in and watch it. like 8 times a year. Like I'm obsessed with it.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
It's true. Like when they're running it, yeah. I love watching Superman. The movie. I think it's a great cinematic experience from beginning to end. Like I think it's just like this 3-part film that's just like you get like that sci-fi Krypton for like the first half, and then it turns into like a Norman Rockwell painting in the middle, and then it's like Metropolis. It's like the French Connection, like at the end. It's just like, to me, it's just like
you kind of get like 3 or 4 movies for the price of one.
That's what I'm saying, and it flows nicely. Like it's not messy, and it's like when you watch Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, it's like all over the place. It's just a mess. Nothing flows. You don't care about anybody. You don't care about.
It's a commercial.
You don't care about anyone.
Joe pointed out that one of the key, points of charm about the Superman mythos is Lois Lane doesn't know that Clark Kent is Superman, right? So they take that out, and then I pointed out
like that's the center
because
of
they're
it.
trying. It wouldn't surprise me as they go on with this story that everyone knows Clark Kent is Superman, because they're trying.
Listen, it's beneath contempt. It's not everything from the first frame onward is wrong about that movie. Yeah. But I was kind of ranting about it. I actually saw it with my nephew again and my girlfriend, and
you watched it a second time.
No. Oh. We went to see it. It was like a thing, and we came home and I was kind of like saying, well, I didn't think it was this too good because of this, that, and the other thing. But I try to get my nephew to talk out his ideas about something before I say mine, because then he'll just end up agreeing with me, whatever. So I was trying to get him to talk it out and everything. We were chatting with it, and I was like, well, let me put on the old Superman movie so I can show you kind of what I'm thinking about. And I swear to God, in 10 minutes, my girlfriend and my nephew were completely hooked on the old Superman. And they were like, it's charming, it's mystical, it's
timeless, man.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, it's a Hollywood movie. Great. It's not, it is what it is. But, in that movie, Superman, the whole point of Superman, especially from a kid's perspective, and I think this is important, is he is more powerful than everyone around him. So he does everything in his power to protect those people. He's not a bully, and he's not a violent person, right?
He doesn't kill people.
He avoids violence at all cost. And in the Zack Snyder movie, the last 70 minutes are nonstop destruction porn.
Yeah.
And if I was Kevin Smith consulting on that screenplay, I would say, well, this is ridiculous. The first thing Superman would do was get everyone away from planet Earth so that he doesn't cause all that destruction. You know what I'm saying? And I know this is all silly shit, but to a kid, those images are going in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, in the old Superman movie, he rescues a fucking cat from a tree, for God's sake.
Yeah, and then the girl goes inside the house, tells the story, and gets slapped in the face for being a liar.
It's just
awesome.
It's just mean spirited. That new movie is just mean spirited, man. It misses the whole point, which is that you have your Batmans out there. You don't need another dark character.
No.
The whole point is that Superman exists outside of time. He's power coupled with kindness, And I don't know. I feel like kids. That's good for kids.
This is like your same. I don't want to get into it too much, but basically, it's your same. You have that same contempt for the Star Trek movies too, right?
Well, to me, Star Trek is about a sense of exploration and wonder. It's it's the thing that can start a kid off going, what would happen if I went out into space and I explored other planets? The Next Generation was a show that was very much based on conflict resolution,
right.
And it's so important. Like, I can't tell you how many people I talk to these days who grew up watching that show, and it alters. It makes you think of problem solving instead of beating something up, So,
right.
Yeah, I nerd out on that stuff, but it's like when you're a kid and you're watching that stuff, it's having an effect, man. Like you can say that it's not, but it is. It's going in there.
Yeah, I was watching Star Trek Into Darkness, and I was just mesmerized by the amount of hatred and violence that was going on. Like it blew my mind. It really blew my mind.
There's just a self-loathing that is running through our popular entertainment right now, because all of that violence that's inflicted is basically a form of masochism.
Yeah.
And there's, I mean, you should ask Joe about the effects of capitalism on the human animal.
Well, didn't you just do it?
I'm sure he could.
Tune in next week, and
I'm sure he could rant about that for 20 or 30 minutes.
Oh, that was on the other show. I see.
That's hilarious.
I will not rant about that this one.
All right, we're gonna move on, I think, gentlemen, to Babel, and I'm gonna introduce it. All right.